Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we're going to be talking about all the matchups that we all should be keeping an eye on for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Week 2 matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons. If you guys are new here, go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button if you do enjoy these types of videos, and leave which matchups you are going to be keeping an eye on in the comment section down below. But let's go ahead and talk about some of these matchups. I have a few of them, and the first one that I want to highlight is going to be Buccaneers linebackers Lavonte David and Devin White versus Atlanta Falcons tight ends Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst. Now, Kyle Pitts, he is the current number 8 overall draft pick in the most recent NFL draft. Hayden Hurst is just a solid veteran tight end, a former first-round draft pick in his own right, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens, now with the Atlanta Falcons. And I want to go back to Buccaneers Week 1 versus the Dallas Cowboys. There, the Cowboys tight ends were targeted a grand total of 9 times, that being Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin, I believe. And the Cowboys tight ends caught all 9 of those targets for 65 yards, no touchdowns, anything along those lines. And I know the yardage isn't that impressive, but regardless, they still caught all of their targets. I do think that is a pretty significant stat line, I guess, in my opinion. On the flip side, in week number 1 versus the Philadelphia Eagles, the Atlanta Falcons targeted their tight ends a total of 12 times for 59 yards. Again, the yardage isn't necessarily there too much, but the targets were certainly there, and both those guys ended up combining for 8 receptions for a piece. So they didn't do a ton with the targets, and it didn't result in as many receptions. They were off on 4 of those targets, but still, I think that if you give both of these guys, both of these tight ends, right, the ability to catch this football and maybe have a little bit of some open space, whatever they want to do. I don't know what the Buccaneers' defensive game plan is or anything along those lines. They could be some pretty dangerous threats in this game, especially in the red zone. Depending on what the Falcons do with their offense, they could definitely have some solid weapons there in Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst. So it will be up to Lavonte David and Devin White to try and corral both of those tight ends and overall maintain the level of receptions that they get when compared to targets. Because I do think the Falcons are going to target their tight ends a pretty decent amount in this ball game. So let's see how David and White answer when they are getting targeted that much. The next matchup that I think we should all be paying attention to going into this upcoming game is going to be Carlton Davis versus Atlanta Falcons number 1 wide receiver Calvin Ridley. And Carlton Davis, I thought, had a very good week 1. He definitely had some tough matchups, and Dak Prescott did not throw the way of Carlton Davis very often. And when he did, overall, it really didn't go that great for him. It wasn't, say, like bad, but it didn't go phenomenal either. Carlton Davis really did hold his own in week number 1. So we are definitely going to have to pay attention to Carlton Davis here versus Calvin Ridley, the Falcons' number 1 wide receiver. Yet again, another tough matchup in week number 1. Calvin Ridley finished that game with 8 targets with 5 receptions for 51 yards. So he wasn't able to do a ton, again, much like the Atlanta Falcons tight ends, didn't get a ton of yardage with those receptions. But the point is that, again, he was targeted a decent amount in week number 1, so you would maybe expect a similar-esque thing in week number 2, so it will be up to Carlton Davis. He was up to the task in week number 1. He's been up to the task multiple times going back to last season as well, and he's, gone up against Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones plenty of times. We'll see how he does in this matchup going into week number 2. The third matchup I think we should all be paying attention to going into this upcoming game is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pass rush versus the Atlanta Falcons offensive line. In week number 1, the Buccaneers pass rush did a job in terms of quarterback hits. They did finish with 7 on Dak Prescott, which I think is a respectable number in my opinion, but only 1 sack. You would like to see that number increase in terms of getting home to the quarterback, getting more pressure on him overall. The Buccaneers did blitz a lot in week number 1. Dak Prescott did a very good job of just, taking the hits and dealing out some really nice passes. So I think a similar thing could be said here with Matt Ryan, because the Falcons' offensive line in week number 1 gave up 3 sacks and 9 quarterback hits to the Philadelphia Eagles. If the Buccaneers get similar production, I think it would be an overall pretty good day for the Buccaneers pass rush. So let's see how they do against a Falcons offensive line, which is coming away from a pretty rough week 1 versus the Eagles. The second to last matchup that I have us all needing to pay attention to is going to be Rob Gronkowski versus Dion Jones. Now, Dion Jones, in my opinion, is one of the best coverage linebackers in the entire league. I really do think he does a really phenomenal job. I still have his pick 6 to end the Buccaneers season in overtime in 2019 burned into my brain. That will never ever go away. Jameis Winston pass to Cam Brate. Dion Jones was right there. Boom, pick 6. Game is over. Season is over. Okay, we'll see you next year, Buccaneers. Now, it did work out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but again, point is that Dion Jones is a pretty darn good linebacker when he is fully healthy, when he is ready to go. He's one of the best linebackers in the league, in my opinion. Rob Gronkowski in week number 1 had a really, really, really good game. He finished that game with 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was also targeted a healthy amount as well. This is going to be a fun matchup because Gronk is looking, somewhat like old Rob Gronkowski again. Dion Jones is still one of the better linebackers in the league. Let's just see these two giant forces collide head-to-head. I'm here for it. I know all of you guys are as well. Brady's going to be targeting Gronk a healthy amount in this game. It worked in week 1, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it, So this one, honestly, is one of the more, tantalizing matchups to watch, if you will. This is going to be one of the more enjoyable matchups to watch, I think, with Gronkowski and Dion Jones just going at it every single passing play snap. It should be a ton of fun, in my opinion. Finally, guys, the last matchup that I have us all needing to keep an eye on going into week number 2 is going to be the Buccaneers wide receivers versus the Falcons secondary. And the Buccaneers are coming off of a game where they had 2 100-yard wide receivers who each scored a touchdown as well, both those guys being Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown. And the Falcons secondary going into this season was unproven. A lot of young guys who definitely had a lot to prove. And in week number 1 versus the Philadelphia Eagles, they certainly had a tough time. Jalen Hurts completed 27 of his 35 passes for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the Eagles didn't have a 100-yard receiver in that game. Their best receiver only had 71 yards, but regardless, the Falcons secondary struggled to get any type of takeaways in that game. I don't even believe they got any fumbles along those lines either. No, they did not. So, all in all, the Falcons secondary struggled against Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles group of targets in terms of passing the football. You'd expect that this would be an even tougher, by a good amount, matchup versus Tom Brady and just the pile of Buccaneers, receiving weapons that they have. We talked about Rob Gronkowski, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Scotty Miller, if they want to throw him in that mix, Mike Evans, which we will talk about in a separate video, maybe Giovani Bernard, will also talk about him in a separate video. Point being, the Buccaneers have a ton of weapons. The Falcons secondary is coming off of a little bit of a shaky game versus the Eagles, where they couldn't really force any takeaways, not many pass breakups, things along those lines, and now they're getting an even tougher matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This one should be interesting. Will the Buccaneers be able to have more continuity with their receiving core, or will the Falcons secondary step up? Let's see what happens there. But overall, guys, that's pretty much all I've got for these matchups. We've talked a little bit about how the Buccaneers did in week 1 and what, this could potentially mean for week number 2. We've talked about how the Atlanta Falcons did in week number 1 and what this could potentially mean versus the Bucs in week number 2. I think we've covered a lot of good matchups here. For me, Carlton Davis versus Calvin Ridley, that's going to be a good matchup. Davis has done it before. We'll see if he can do it again. The Buccaneers pass rush versus the Falcons offensive line. You hope there's some improvement there from week number 1. Not even so much as in quarterback hits, but just finishing the play and being able to get more pressure and more sacks on a guy like Matt Ryan, where if he has time, he can do some very, very dangerous things. Gronkowski versus Dion Jones, in my opinion, is going to be probably the best matchup. And one of the more important matchups for the Buccaneers defense, I feel, is going to be Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst versus Levante David and Devin White. If those Falcons tight ends can get going, and they can be like that safety blanket, that, check down type option for Matt Ryan, it could be a game where the Falcons are able to drive down the field on a handful of drives throughout the game if those tight ends are not kept in check. So we'll see how David and White do in regards to that. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got, guys. Let me know what you think about these matchups down in the comment section below. Again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.